Good morning. I don't know how I can follow that. That's heavy stuff, isn't it? I'm sitting there saying, how can you speak after that? I mean, the people want more of that. But we can, in your cars, you have gears. You shift gears. Shall we all just shift gears now for a little? And I thank our brother for the prayer. I just consider that my prayer as well. As we go right into the message, I understand this is a different schedule today. It comes from the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, chapter 22. Now, on Tuesday, we spoke about evangelism and witnessing. You remember that? Evangelism and witnessing. How we take the message to the people. And yesterday, we spoke about the parable of the sower, which tells us what people do with the message of God that we give to them. What kind of soil does it fall on? And today, as we take the story of Balaam, it's going to tell us something about one of those soils, the seed that fell in thorny soil, and the thorns grew up and choked them. You remember one of the problems there was the cares of this life, and another peril was the deceitfulness of riches. In Balaam, he would see that. And tomorrow, when I speak about the Apostle Paul, you would see an example of the good soil that remains faithful until the end. So that has been the tie in the messages for this week. So Numbers chapter 22. The story of Balaam opens with the country of Moab in a state of panic. In a state of panic. The Israelites have just arrived on Moab's northern border, and it strikes terror in the belly of Balak. The king declares a state of crisis and comes up with a very unusual method to attack it. Let us look at Numbers, beginning at chapter 4, in the middle of chapter 4 of Numbers. So Balak, son of Zippor. By the way, you gentlemen have been putting the text up on the screen. I'm using the NIV. If you have the NIV, you can put that up. Otherwise, it's going to confuse the folks because I'll be reading very rapidly some of the texts this morning. And they may not get the emphasis that I'm trying to make. I'd be pleased if you have the NIV. I don't know if that's possible to put it up there for us. Now, where was I? Verse 4. Let's begin there again. So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pithor, near the river, in his native land. And the message was, people have come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on them. Now, just let me stop there for a minute and say that this matter of the curse and belief in the curse is not simply something that we should associate with so-called primitive countries. I remember that back in, I think it was 2008, thereabouts, the Associated Press carried a story. A construction worker took a jersey from the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox are not known for winning games, but they are rivals of the New York Yankees, and they were building a new stadium for the Yankees. And this construction worker, who was a fan of the Boston Red Sox, took a Boston Red Sox jersey and buried it in the concrete as they built the New York Stadium. And somebody let the word out that the jersey of the Boston Red Sox was buried in the concrete of the New York Yankees. And when the managers heard about it, they sent workers with jackhammers when they heard where the jersey was buried, and to dig through that concrete to get that jersey out, which was to bring bad luck to the New York Yankees. This is the United States. This is New York. This is not a so-called primitive country. And so this matter of the curse is everywhere. So way back there, Balak said, come and put a curse on these people because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps I will be able to defeat them and then drive them out of the country. For I know that those whom you bless are blessed, and those whom you curse are cursed. So the messengers arrived at Balaam's house. And as soon as these messengers opened their mouths, Balaam knew what they were talking about. And he knew whom they were talking about. And his entire body said, his entire system said, no, I might be a backsliding prophet, but I'm not going to put a curse on these people. Not Israel. No, not Israel. But that bag in the messenger's hand looked mighty good and heavy. And he was not about to say no too quickly. Stay the night, he said. Stay the night and give me a little time. And isn't that our problem? We know what God wants us to do, but we don't want to do it. And so we say, give me some time. I'll pray about it. You already know what God wants you to do, but you want to pray about it. Give me a little time. And God came to Balaam in the night. Let us look at verse 9 to begin with there. Verse 9 of chapter 22. God came to Balaam and asked, who are these men with you? God is always asking questions, the answers to which he already knows. Adam, where are you? Cain, where is your brother Abel? Elijah, what are you doing here? Balaam, who are these men with you? Balaam told God who the men were. And in verse 12, God said to Balaam, do not go with them. Now, is that a clear command or is that a clear command? Do not go with them. You must not put a curse on those people because they are blessed. The next morning, Balaam got up and said to Balak's princes, go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. I can't remember how it says it in the King James Version, but it has to be the equivalent. The Lord has refused to let me go with you. Sometimes we can come to the place where we think that God is holding us back from advancement and success. D.M. Canwright was one of the rising stars in the early Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was a powerful speaker, and he was scheduled to speak one time in a public place, and he invited his friend D.W. Reeves to be with him. And he said to D.W. Reeves, I want you to sit in the audience tonight, and as I speak, to make notes, to critique me afterwards, to tell me how well I did. And Canwright spoke that night. At the end of the speech, he and D.W. are walking in the park nearby. And after they had chit-chatted about this and that, Canwright said, now, D.W., how did I do tonight? What notes do you have for me? What criticisms do you have for me? And D.W. said to him, to be truthful, I became so wrapped up in your talk. It was so powerful that I forgot all about taking notes. You were brilliant. And Canwright thought about the compliment for a while, And then he said, you know, D.W., I could be a great man today were it not for this unpopular message. I could be a great man today were it not for this unpopular message. And as some of you might know, Canwright eventually left the church, and he died in disgrace. It was a very sorrowful thing. Sometimes we can think that God is holding us back. We can get to the place where we think that his requirements are too strict, too narrow for us. If only I didn't have to waste an entire day keeping Sabbath. If only I didn't have to be so careful about what I eat and what I drink. If only I can lift my glass and sip on champagne with all the others. If only I can spend time with them down at the nightclub on a Friday night or any other time. What camaraderie I could be having with them. How much more advanced I could be in the world and in my career. Sometimes we can think God is holding us back. Balaam said, the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. The messengers returned to Balak with Balaam's message, and I can imagine that Balak said to them, tell me something about this guy. Do you mean to say that he was not impressed by the quantity of money we sent to him? And the men said, well, it's not that. We think he wanted to come. We can read it in his body language. But this God he claims to serve, he said, refused to let him come. When Balak heard that, he sent a bigger delegation with a heavier briefcase to Balaam. And here is what happened in chapter 22, verses 16 and 17 of chapter 22. They came to Balaam and said, this is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Do not let anything keep you from coming to me, because I will reward you handsomely and do whatever you say. Come and put a curse on these people for me. Do not let anything. And I can imagine Balaam, as he listened to them the second time, saying, no, no. But at the end of his speech, the emissary turns to his assistant and said to him, bring the briefcase. And he brought the briefcase, he puts it down on the table, and he opens it. And Balaam has never seen more cash in all his life. Down payment, the messenger says. Down payment. You'd get the rest when you get to Moab and after you have pronounced the curse. Balaam says. His mood beginning to change. This visit can perhaps be the big break I was waiting for all my life. And who's to say? Who's to say that God is not, after all, behind it? But I must not let them know what I'm thinking. Gentlemen, he says, even if Balak should give me his palace full of silver and gold, I can't do anything but what God says. However, stay the night and let's see how things look in the morning. The deceitfulness of riches. During the night, God came to him with an interesting response that we find in verse 20. That night, God came to Balaam and said, since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but do only what I tell you. In other words, you will do only what I tell you. Sometimes when we seem hell-bent on doing something, God says, all right, if you want to do it that bad, go ahead. And that's what he said to Balaam. So with God's highly qualified permission, Balaam now sets out on his ill-fated journey. Let's take a look, beginning at verse 21. Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. But God was very angry when he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the road into a field. I'm always amazed at how many cultures can imbibe the biblical teaching with a little twist. Back home, we have the belief that animals can see spirits. And so if I were riding my donkey and all of a sudden the donkey stops, that means that the donkey has seen something. And what I was supposed to do was to remove my shirt, turn it back to front, and then the spirit would think I'm going that way. And so then I can go this way. Stupid spirits, isn't it? They have enough sense to make themselves invisible, but they can't figure out that I'm not going that way. So that's what we believed, and they got this, I believe, from the story of Balaam. So the donkey saw the angel, and the donkey turned aside into the field. Balaam beat her to get her on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between 2 vineyards with walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed close to the wall, crushed Balaam's feet against it. So he beat her again. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room on either side, either to the right or to the left. Then when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she laid down on the Balaam, and he was angry and he beat her again. I had a donkey like that. He was so lazy that someday he just laid down onto me. I don't know what he saw in the way. Balaam beat the donkey. And what was God trying to do? What was God trying to do? God was trying to dissuade Balaam from his reckless journey. And sometimes God will do that. He will put obstacles in our way. A young man or a young woman, an older man or an older woman, is heading down into the city's red light district, bent on dangerous mischief. God sees that, tries to put obstacles in the way. A narrow brush with a car could have been a serious accident, but somehow they escaped unhurt. And something says within them, perhaps I shouldn't be going down there. But they persist. And then comes a narrow brush with the police, red lights flashing, pulls them aside, questions them, gives them a warning. And again, they say within themselves, perhaps I shouldn't be going. But they want to go, and they press on. And then some sign put up by the Baptists or the Pentecostals, a sign they had seen a dozen times or more. But tonight, that sign flashes in words of blazing fire to them. And the sign says, "You who are thirsty, come to me and drink." God putting up warnings in the way, trying to hold them back as he was trying to hold Balaam back. But they persist. And when God saw that, he took extraordinary steps, if perchance to turn him back. Go to verse 28. It says, then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth. What is the word used for donkey in the King James Version? Anyone? The ass's mouth? That's what it says there? Somebody, in Trinidad, there were some colorful pastors that we had down there. One of them was Pastor Gadsby, those of you from that area, and one of them was Pastor Manaram. And I remember being in Pastor Manaram's church one day, and he was preaching about Balaam. And he said he met somebody one day who said, what about this Bible of yours with an ass speaking? And you know what he said? Some of you have heard. Pastor Manaram said, there are so many people today who speak like asses. It's not surprising that an ass once spoke like a man. But my Bible has the better word donkey. I prefer the word donkey. And it says, then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times? Balaam answered the donkey. Balaam answered the donkey. My wife and I were walking one night, and usually when we walked in that particular place, I would go ahead of her, and then I would double back because I walk faster than she does. But it's night. We don't want to be too far from each other. And then I would pass her and then double back again. And one of these times when she was by herself, I noticed she turned back and coming back to me. I said, what's wrong? She said, dog. And my wife is deadly scared of loose dogs. All dogs. And shortly afterwards, a man met us. And he said, have you guys seen a dog? We said, yes. My wife said, he went that way. And we came back just in time to find him. He had been calling the dog, and now the dog comes back to him. And he's angry with that dog. And he says to the dog, why did you do this? Look at you. You're all wet. Why did you run off like that? And I thought, if that dog had answered one of his questions, he would have been the one running. Because a dog is not supposed to speak. Neither a donkey. But Balaam answers the donkey. And Balaam said, you have made a fool of me. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now. The donkey said to Balaam, am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you? No, he said. You know, there's an ancient saying that a Greek saying, that he whom the gods destroy, they first make mad. And here we find an intelligent man, drunk with greed, having a conversation with a donkey as though it was some normal thing to do. Greed and lust can make us completely irrational and self-destructive. At this point, something else happens. Verse 31. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face down. The angel of the Lord asked him, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you, because your path is a reckless one before me. Shouldn't he have turned back right then? The donkey saw me, the angel said, and turned out of the way 3 times. If she had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared her life. The donkey was more righteous than the prophet. I would have spared her life. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. And notice how you describe his sin. I have sinned. I did not realize that you were standing in the road to oppose me. That's not the sin. Now, if you are displeased, I will go back. If you are displeased, I will go back. The angel said, no, go ahead. But you'll make a fool of yourself, in other words. And so Balaam persisted. Balaam persisted on his journey. The morning after he arrived, and by the way, as the king of Balak, as King Balak understood he was coming, a huge delegation met him. And if you read the Bible account, they fed them that night. He was a stuffed prophet when he went to bed that night. And my teacher used to say in seminary, a stuffed prophet sees no vision. Watch the amount you eat sometimes when you have to speak. So Balaam awoke the next morning after arriving in Moab, and he directs Balak to build 7 altars, prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams. And Balaam goes off into a secluded spot. And this is what develops in chapter 23, beginning at verse 4. God met him. God met with him. And Balaam said, I have prepared 7 altars, and on each altar I have offered a bull and a ram. Oh God, aren't you impressed with that? God brushed aside all of that. The Lord put a message in Balaam's mouth and said, go back to Balak and give him this message. So he went back to him and found him standing beside his offering with all the princes of Moab. Notice that, with all the princes. The king of Balak is not there by himself. The entire palace entourage and many people besides have come to see the pronouncement of this curse. It's a public affair. With all the princes of Moab. Then Balaam uttered this oracle, said, Balak brought me from Aram, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come, he said, curse Jacob for me. Come, denounce Israel. How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? From the rocky peaks I see them. From the heights I view them. I see a people who are apart and do not consider themselves one of the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob? These are all blessings, friends. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous. He even ends with a prayer for himself. Let me die the death of the righteous, and may my end be like theirs. Let me die the death of the righteous. But you cannot die the death of the righteous if you have not lived the life of the righteous. Over there in New Orleans, we have something called the Mardi Gras, a carnival that they have every year. And one of the main events of the Mardi Gras used to be, I don't know if they still have it, I've not seen it for years, used to be a public parade with people dancing in the streets, some of them with umbrellas, even though it wasn't raining. They're dancing in the street, and they're singing that well-known Christian song, when the saints go marching in, when the saints go marching in. Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Every last one of these drunken celebrants would like to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Every last one of them. But you cannot reap the rewards of the righteous if you have not lived the life of the righteous. Now, if Balak was scandalized by this first oracle from Balaam's mouth, he was to find himself outraged again and again and again as Balaam came once more, each time from a secluded spot, not to curse Israel, but to bless Israel. In fact, Balaam's second oracle ended with the words that must have sent shivers up and down the spine of Balak. Look at it in chapter 23, verses 21 to 23. No misfortune is seen in Jacob, no misery observed in Israel. The Lord their God is with them. The shout of the king is among them. God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox. There is no sorcery against Jacob. There is no divination against Israel. You know, as a lad growing up in the islands, outside the Adventist church, I was always afraid. I was always afraid that somebody would do something to me. There was a man in the town near where I grew up, belonging to one of the well-to-do families on the island, who periodically would come down with something. It was kind of a madness. And when that struck him, he would leave his house and sometimes go naked into the woods, into the forest somewhere, and his relatives would have to come and find him, and they would send him away, I think, to Trinidad for treatment. And the story was that some business rival years earlier had put a curse on him. Back there we say, had put light in his head. And so as a boy, I was always scared that somebody would do something to me. They said that people can come to your yard, dig up your yard and put something in there that can harm you. You know about that? And that scared me as a boy. Now, I believe that some of these stories were made just to scare people, but those who have lived in places like that would not count them all off as just Nancy stories. Friends, voodoo, obeah, witchcraft, these are not simply fanciful notions and wishful thinking. These are genuine phenomena in the real world. But that second oracle, through that second oracle, God speaking to Balaam says, there is no sorcery against Jacob. There is no divination against Israel. What a joy it was to come into the Seventh-day Adventist church and realize I did not have to be afraid anymore. Every child of God can say, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 27 and verse 1. No one can harm the child of God. Praise the Lord for that. By the third oracle, Balaam does not even pretend to go into a seclusion anymore. He knows that by this time God has made a complete fool of him, and all he can do is just open his mouth and let God speak. And this is what we find in chapter 24. Chapter 24, verses 8 to 11. Chapter 24, verses 8 to 11. God brought them out of Egypt. They have the strength of a wild ox. They devour hostile nations and break their bones in pieces. And their arrows, with their arrows they pierce them. Like a lion, they crouch and lie down. Like a lioness, who dares rouse them? May those who bless you be blessed, and those who curse you be cursed. Wow. Then Balak's anger burned against Balaam, it says in verse 10. He struck his hands together and said to him, I summoned you to curse my enemies, but you have blessed them these 3 times. Now get out. Those are my words, but that's what he meant. Get out. Embarrassing, awkward, humiliating. You could cut the silence with a knife. All these people gathered there, no one talking. And then Balaam breaks the silence. And here's what he says in verse 14 of chapter 24. Now I'm going back to my people. But come, let me warn you what this people will do to your people, what this people will do to your people in days to come. So why would Balak subject himself to a single more word from this malicious prophet from the north? Why would Balak ever want to listen to him again? You know, in Washington, around Washington, we have a radio program called the Steve Harvey Morning Show. And some of you who have lived in that area might remember that show. I don't hear it except about twice a year or so because it's coming when I have my devotions. And I forget about it anyway. But one of the features of the program, of that morning program, is what they call a prank call by a fellow named Nephew Tommy. And the idea of the prank call is that somebody might prank you. Suppose you're my brother, I might prank you and give Nephew Tommy all the goods on the pastor. I tell him where he lives, his address, where his children go to school, what his wife does, and things like that. So when the radio station, Tommy, nephew Tommy calls you. He has the goods on you. And so he would say something, are you Mr. Thomas, who lives on Cedar Avenue, 445 Cedar Avenue? The radio audience would not hear the address, but they will hear the address. Yes, I am. And your wife works with the federal government in the finance department? Yes. Your child goes, who are you calling me? I'll get to it. And your child goes to a daycare center, the ABC Daycare Center on Jack Street? Yes. So this time, this caller knows you. Now, sir, excuse me, but I want to talk to you about your wife. Her little finger, does she have a nervous little finger that sometimes she can't control it? Yes, but why are you talking to me about my wife? I'll get to that, sir, but just one or two more things. Is she allergic to cats? Yes, she's allergic to cats. Who are you calling me? I'm getting to, does she have a mole on both sides of her belly button? Yes. And why should you be asking me about that? And Tommy breaks down into weeping. And he begins to cry. And he says, you know, I don't know how to say that to you, but for years we have been looking for my brother who was missing. And I don't know how to say that to you, but your wife is our long-lost brother. And by that time, of course, the person is angry, they're confused, they're waiting for the wife to come home so they can shoot her, and they want to shoot this person on the radio. And then he says at that point, when they are as angry as could be, I have one more thing to say to you. And they never hang up, because he knows so much about them, they want to know what else this queer person wants to say to them. And then he says, this is nephew Tommy from the Steve Harvey Morning Show. And then they relax. Something like that is happening here. Balaam says, I have one more thing to say to you. Are you listening? And superstition and natural curiosity combine. And Balak can't hang up on him. He's got to listen to what he has to say. And so now, we come to the crux of the story where Balaam utters this amazing oracle, beginning at verse 15. He uttered this oracle, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the oracle of one whose eyes sees clearly, the oracle of one who hears the words of God, who has knowledge from the Most High, who sees a vision from the Almighty, who falls prostrate and whose eyes are opened. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the fords of Moab, the skulls of all the sons of Sheth. In this last oracle, God transports Balaam 15 centuries into the future, and he beholds the vision of a distant star, the coming of the Messiah. And beyond it, to the glorious day, when all the Balaks and Balaams and Babylons of the world will be crushed by the Messiah, the Star of Jacob, who will bring eternal peace to this wretched, dysfunctional planet. What an ending! What an ending. You know, one of the things I've noticed about novels, the few that I've read, is the difficulty they have with the ending. The difficulty they have with the ending. You remember Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code? That was the rage of the whole Western world and beyond a few years ago. Well, I took time to read it because everybody was talking about it. As an editor, I wanted to know what all the fuss was about. And what I found was that after all the cloak and dagger intrigues and hair-raising exploits in museums and on the streets of Paris and London, the story comes down to a totally pedestrian ending. When I got to the end of the book, I said, which in the Caribbean language means, what stupid nonsense. What a waste of time. Engaging, hair-raising plots, but with an ending as flat as ginger ale that's been sitting in an open bottle for 3 days. But the drama of the ages will end brilliant, glorious, eye-popping. In the vision, Balaam saw a distant star, a scepter, emerging from Israel. And on one Friday afternoon, outside Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, as he hung dying on a Roman cross, it looked as if all the Balaams and the Balaks of the world had finally nailed him with the ultimate curse. But early Sunday morning, friends, if I were in a black American audience in the United States, and I would say the expression, but early Sunday morning, the entire audience would begin to move because they know what's coming. Early Sunday morning, there was a rustling. There was a rustling in the tomb as Jesus broke free. And he placed his feet triumphant on all the sons of Sheth and all the Balaams, the Balaks and Balaams of the world. And he said, I'm he that liveth and was dead. And behold, what? I'm alive forevermore, amen? And have the keys of hell and of death. Chapter 7 of Revelation flows out of that great victory. Chapter 7 of Revelation flows out of that great victory. In chapter 7 of Revelation, John hears the names. He hears names. The names of tribes. The names of tribes of Israel. The names of tribes similar to those tribes on Moab's northern border. Of the tribe of Judah, 12,000 sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 sealed. And on down the line. John is listening. John is hearing. And now he begins to see. Let us see what he saw in Revelation chapter 7, beginning at verse 9. Revelation chapter 7, beginning at verse 9. After this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. You know, you go to a general conference session and you want to find somebody. Tough, isn't it? Tough. And over there on the sea of glass, I'm trying to find my wife. She's trying to find me. Would we find each other? Would we be there? Of every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels. You know, there is singing up in heaven, such as we have never known. How the angels sing the praises of the Lamb upon the throne. Their sweet harps are ever tuneful, and the voice is always clear. Oh, that we should be more like them as we serve our Master here. Holy, holy is what the angels say. And I expect to help them make the courts of heaven ring. But when I sing redemption's story, they will fold their wings, for angels never felt the joy that our salvation brings. And here they are. And John says, who are these? No, the angel says to him, who are these? In verse 14, who are clothed in white robes. And John says, sir, you know? And he says, these are they, who have come out of great tribulation and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. They before the throne of God and serve them day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more. They shall thirst no more. Neither shall the sun lighten them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters. And God shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. That's how the story ends, my dear friends. That's how the drama ends. Hear it in the writings of Ellen G. White. In the Bible, she says, the inhabitants of the saved is called a country. There the heavenly shepherd leads his flock to fountains of living water. The tree of life yields its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. There are ever-flowing streams, clear as crystal, and beside them waving trees cast their shadow upon the paths prepared for the ransomed of the Lord. There are wide-spreading plains swelling into hills of beauty, and the mountains of God rear their lofty summits. On those peaceful plains, beside those living streams, God's people, God's people, God's people, so long pilgrims and wanderers shall find a home. We used to sing that old song, God's tomorrow is a day of gladness, and its joys shall never fade. No more weeping, no more sense of sadness, no more foes to make afraid. God's tomorrow. God's tomorrow. Every cloud will pass away at the dawning of the day. God's tomorrow. No more sorrow, for I know that God's tomorrow will be better than today.